Andy! What's up?
Nothing. Sorry, I could see y'all for a minute, but I couldn't hear anything or see
Uh-huh.
myself. But I'm here now. Hello.
Oh my gosh!
Yay!
Yay! White people!
Wow,
Oh
don't
my
hear that very
gosh.
often.
Yeah, no, I know. No, I'm actually really excited that you're here. Yo, okay, so everybody, this is Andy Bauer.
Woo!
Yes, so me and Will have actually been talking for, I don't know, what, an hour or so at this point, at least a little bit more. But again, this is going to be a 2-part episode. I already know because we're just putting Andy on here. And at least on my little timestamp, it says that we're about over 2 hours. But then again, we didn't get started super quick. But anyway, hi, Andy. It's been a pretty lit conversation so far. For the listeners, Andy is a really good friend of mine. We mostly interact online, but he's really been there for me, like, throughout, like, since we stopped doing shows together, because I actually met him doing the Big Easy Boys and Big Easy Babes performances that we were doing around the city. And if you don't know what the Big Easy Boys or the Big Easy Babes are, they're basically like the Jersey Boys, but New Orleans style. So Andy played the sax, and yeah, we just kind of kept in touch with each other ever since. Also, Andy, meet Will. Will,
Hey,
meet
Will.
Andy.
Hi, Andy.
So yeah, me and Will have just actually, you know what, just to kind of get a little icebreaker, Andy, because I've just basically talked about you, and I did this with Will too, and I need to stop doing that. I want y'all to describe, like, what do you do? Like, what are you doing right now? And like, what did you do before quarantine and your life? What you doing right now?
So I'm a band director at a K through 8 school, and I also, as you mentioned, perform and stuff like that. So before quarantine, I was very busy, running around like a chicken with my head cut off, from gigs to, stuff with the kids to school and all that. And then once we had to stay at home, it was like a flip of a switch. All of a sudden, I went from working 60, 65 hours a week to just like that, working 10 or 12 and trying to figure out what to do with myself and my brain the rest of the time. So,
Dang. Yeah. And since you were a band director, you can't really teach band over. Well, are you like teaching lessons or anything, like through like video chat, Zoom?
not too much. Mostly what I was doing was my team and I, so like myself and the art teacher and garden teacher and the PE coaches and stuff at my school, we put together a website of like resources in all of our different arts disciplines, so that all of our kids and families and stuff could get on there and find a bunch of activities to do. But like, some of my kids have instruments at home, some don't, some have reliable internet access, some have it on phones, on computers. So it's like, it was
Yeah.
really hard to do any sort of one fits all like lesson type of thing.
Yeah. Well, thankfully we're in phase 1 now, so maybe we can get a little quote unquote back to normal. But honestly, our normal is not going to be the same normal that we had before the quarantine, which I'm okay with, honestly.
We need a better normal.
Yeah, we need a better normal anyway.
Yeah.
Hello. So Andy, just to kind of keep you in the loop, me and Will have just basically been talking about kind of like our experiences being Black, as usual, but like we've also kind of started to dive into the things that we consider profitable or like acknowledgeable, admirable in a white ally. And so we've been kind of describing, different instances on like where this actually worked, and like a white ally, we gain more respect for them, and then like situations where it didn't. So I guess to kind of start things off for you, and if I have to like go back and like maybe reference something else, I will, but I just want to get into it.
Cool.
What would you consider, and I know this is weird, and me and Will actually just talking about this, because basically the questions that I'm asking you is like basically the opposite of what I've been asking Will, and no one really asks the white person like what they consider in a Black ally. So I wanted to know, what do you consider admirable in a Black ally? Like, what's going to get you to gravitate towards them? Like, what is something that you normally, or like, are there like certain characteristics about that person, like things that they say, shared experiences or whatever? Like, what do you look for in a Black ally?
I've just been really lucky in that I've had people of color in my life who take the time to explain things to me that I don't
Mm.
see or feel or understand the same way that they do.
Mm.
Because I grew up like in a area with very little diversity. I mean, in my whole high school, there was 3 Black kids. 2 of them were
Mm.
twins, and the third was their older brother. So
Shout out,
it
shout
was
out.
small town Pennsylvania, man. It's a special place.
Wait,
So
what part of Pennsylvania? I forgot.
Factoryville. It's a
I
very
don't
small
even
town in the top right hand corner.
top
So,
right hand corner. Oh, okay, yeah, no. I
um,
haven't.
but yeah, so I honestly like issues of racial inequality and that sort of stuff wasn't even really on my radar that much growing up because I only really had a couple Black friends. Like I said, I played music with those guys a lot and stuff. So I was very fortunate in that. But I mean, we weren't really talking about race. You know, we were 14, 15, 16-year-old kids. And I think, I don't know for sure. I have a feeling if I was the white kid surrounded by people of color, maybe we would have been talking about race at a younger age. But
You're a product of your environment. Will.
yeah, for real.
Sorry, you were talking about that earlier.
So we weren't really talking about it. And then when I got to college was really when, you know, I had some different courses and just some new friends in college that came from different backgrounds and that kind of things. Was when I really started to, I guess, have my mind opened up and my eyes opened up to the realities in our country and in the world. I feel like that was a really long-winded answer, but basically,
no, that was great.
Like really just folks taking the time to explain things. And obviously the flip side of that is like, as white folks, we need to shut up and listen a lot more. But you know, if we shut up and listen and no one's telling us anything, we're not going to learn. We're not going to get any better, you know,
Right.
at being allies or people.
Yeah. Ooh, thanks, Andy. Oh my gosh. And I just realized like I was supposed to ask you about your background before I even got into that whole question. But thank you for like, you know, like circling back over to like, okay, this is, you know, my background. Like this is why I'm white and all that, you know, like, so thank you for that.
Yeah.
So this is this is a 2-part question. And I'm glad I wrote all these down because gosh, you know what? No, I have another question. I had a question because this is just a random question that I have because you said how long have you been playing instruments?
Like 20 years.
Oh, okay.
I started when I was 10 and I'm 30. So
okay. So when you were in band, like while you were still in Pennsylvania, did you get any like sheet music or did y'all ever have to learn any like songs that were like by Black artists or like a Black
composer?
Composer or something where like I don't know, I'm thinking like, okay, I'm thinking drumline, like have you I don't know why I'm thinking about like, you know how some bands like play in drumline, like the way they play there, or like let's say like, you know, Mardi Gras, like a lot of the bands there versus like where was the band director or the band that you were a part of trying to emulate that sound, or y'all just kind of playing it the way that I don't know. As it was written. Yes, as it was written. Thank you, Will.
Yeah, so we the type of bands that I played in school, it was all like they call it core style, but it's basically all like, I guess you could compare it to like military style. All of our stuff was reading music. It was more like not classical, but more in the classical vein.
Okay, yeah.
And so I didn't really get most of my exposure to music when I was young was from my my brother and sister. They're like about not quite 8 and 9 years older than me, respectively. And so when I was growing up, they exposed me to a lot of Black music.
Nice.
How
all
they
right,
got
brother,
into it,
sister.
I never asked them how they got into all that, but so they exposed me to a lot more Black music. But the music educators that I had growing up never really made an effort to, or at least not an obvious effort to include music by, you know, composers of color or anything like that.
Okay. Well, that was just a question of mine. I was just like, oh, well, that was something that hit in my head, and I was like, okay, 2-part question for you. Has there been a time where you didn't come through for a Black person or like a Black ally? Let's say they were being discriminated against, and you just didn't know what to do in that point, and you just didn't know how to express it at that point. If you have an instance of like that, well, actually, I should ask, do you have an instance like that?
I feel 100% certain that I do, but I can't think of any. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, you
I
would have to
think
have been like that person of color would have had to told you, yo, you didn't
ex-
come through me. Come there, come
exactly.
through. And it,
And
yeah.
that's an experience I don't remember having, someone
Okay.
specifically calling me out on it. But I
Gotcha.
mean, as mentioned, I'm a white dude from small town Pennsylvania. I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure at some point I did that.
Yeah.
But it's hard, like, thinking back, it's hard to find a time specifically,
Mm-hmm.
to make an example out of.
Okay, well, if there wasn't anything that was like in person, like online, like I know like when I'm posting or whatever, like sometimes I'll just like call white people out like out of nowhere. Like any of those times has it been, have you felt like, oh shoot, I'm not doing enough like right now, like I really should, like where if it, even if it's not me, like someone else that you know that you look up to or that you consider a Black ally, was there a time like when you just online and realized that from somebody else that, oh man, I should be doing more?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all reach a point where we're going, whether you want to call it a conversation, debate, argument, it's anywhere on that spectrum, but where you're going back and forth with somebody and you just get so exhausted of it because they're not hearing what you have to say and everything. And obviously, I'm sure y'all know that feeling a whole lot better than I do, but there's certainly been times where I'm trying to get someone to understand something and it's just not clicking and not clicking and not clicking, and then you
Yeah.
just give up. But it's like, I also feel when I think about it, when I look back at times like that, like I don't think white folks should or can give that up as quickly. You know what I mean? Like, as
Yeah.
people of color, it's a lot more important for y'all, like, to
Yeah,
take care of
we're trying
yourselves,
to
I think.
climb up the ladder.
Yeah.
Y'all already at the top looking at the pretty view, I guess.
Yeah. So it's like,
Metaphors.
yeah. So I try not to do that and bow out of conversations early when it just doesn't seem like it's going anywhere. But I've certainly been guilty of that at times.
Gotcha. Well, thanks for that input. I really appreciate it. I got one more just question for you before we bring Will back into this conversation. um, do you feel that there are any downfalls in the white community on discussing racial matters with other cultures? Doesn't even have to just be with like Black people, because I
Oh,
mean yeah.
you ready for another 2 hours? um, I think the biggest things, honestly, are just a misunderstanding of different terms and different concepts. So, like, I think a couple of the biggest issues is a lot of people in the white community still don't really know the difference between racism and prejudice. And so, like, when, if someone makes the statement, for example, that all white people are racist, right? A lot of people are going to flip their lids at that. I'm not racist. I don't discriminate against people of color. I don't do this. I don't do that. And but really, that just stems from a misunderstanding of, like, a system of racism that we benefit from
Yeah.
versus, like, active prejudice.
And I should also, sorry, 1 second, Eddie, because I remembered like this was the main thing. Okay, sorry, I'm getting so hyped for this because I think when I was like, okay, Andy is my white ally, hands down, done. It was when he posted on his personal Facebook page that like all white people are racist, and he got like so much backlash for it. And I literally had to think. I think I had either posted that like I don't know how long before, but I remember posting the same thing and people giving me the same backlash. But like to have a white person post it and see like what was going on there, like it was just so interesting because you know if you think like in the way that you had to like really think about it, like people don't want to say white people don't want to think that they're still racist in these times because, you know, we have a black president. Like I think you posted it while Obama was still president and everything. So like they're like, what are you talking about? Your president's black. Da, 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 da. But no, that was like the hands down. I was like, if he's able to say this, then he understands completely where, at least where I was coming from, or like my mental space around it all. It's not saying that like, yes, all white people, whether you like it or not, they benefit from the system, and
Right.
and that's what makes it racist. The system is racist, and white people benefit from it. So in a way, you're racist too. Anyway, yeah, okay, go ahead, Andy. Sorry, I had to like.
That's all right. But yeah, I think that's one of the biggest issues, because I think people take things personally. Like, you know, if you say because I'm white that I benefit from racism or whatever, a lot of people take that as a personal attack or like a personal accusation, but it's really not.
Yeah.
And along the same lines, I think the other biggest issue or misconception is like a lot of people don't understand the difference or the relationship between idea of privilege and the idea of comfort. Because I think that a lot of white folks, when they hear the term white privilege, but they haven't lived a comfortable life, they think, well, how am I privileged? I grew up poor. I like this. I like that. So I think that's one of the other big issues, is that a lot of people just haven't accepted or haven't heard that whole concept.
Yeah.
And like the idea of intersectionality too, where it's like just because we're saying that white people benefit from white privilege, we're not ignoring the fact that maybe you don't have socioeconomic privilege, or maybe you don't have some other kind of privilege.
Right.
So I think I really think that more white folks would be open to hearing about this type of stuff if they had a better understanding of like those two like core ideas, you know?
Yeah.
And I think, honestly, to add, it's the idea that people think of racism as just like one thing. And I was expressing this to Jessica before, but it's a spectrum. Like, you know, there's microaggressions. Like, people don't realize that racism is not just like, you know, confined to this one idea. There are definitely different levels to that, different degrees of racism that people do, that they don't think that, oh, that's not me, you know, in a Ku Klux Klan outfit.
Right.
But, you know, but it's like, but I'm not racist because I'm not doing that. Well, you know, there's different degrees, so it's crazy that way.
Right. Yeah. So perfect. Oh, I love how this all just kind of grabs, like, is going back together into like my next questions and stuff. So Andy, as I was kind of talking about earlier, I don't know if you were even aware of this. I did post about it on my Facebook, but I had technically 3 instances. One day I had posted an Instagram post about Ahmaud Arbery. Well, it wasn't about Ahmaud Arbery, but like it definitely like piggybacked off of it. It was like a political cartoon with a black man about to go out for a run. And he was like, I'm about to go out for a run. And then someone else is like, don't forget your mask. And then the mask is like the black person is now wearing a white person's, like a white mask, like a white male mask as they're running. And long story short, I had some backlash about that through 2 different people. One of them wasn't necessarily the worst of the backlash, but I think in both instances they were both white males. One wasn't even from America, but that doesn't make a difference. Like it is what it is. Actually, no, it's not. It is what it is. But I think in that instance, I'm gonna talk about this too. There are people on the other side of the world that think that they are not benefiting from white privilege. For some reason. I don't know why, because like white privilege is a thing like all around the world. It's not just an America thing. So for this guy, he came up and like basically told me, well, if you saw the comments on my page, you know, he was just basically kind of sort of trying to generalize race and humanity as it is, like not like really calling out. And the thing is like his comment was humanity needs to grow up. And I'm thinking to myself, this political cartoon is literally about race. So it's like, I told him, I said, I was like, yeah, humanity does need to grow up, but Black people are included in that. I don't think they're the ones that need to grow up right now. And then he was just like, oh, I was just trying to generalize it. I'm not, not trying to talk about race or anything. And I said, well, the self-aware millennial, I said that, I was like, I said the self-aware millennial does not, like, I'm not saying that we're not welcoming of people, but like the whole point of the self-aware millennial is to be more aware about your privileges. So I was like, I told him, I was like, yo, like, if you can't do that, then, like, literally just, I don't know the exact words I said. All I basically told him, I was like, if you're not right now, you are not acknowledging your privilege, and I don't appreciate it. And then he was just, and I told him I wasn't going to have a conversation with him because I was tired. I didn't even want to like talk about it. And, he was like, I don't even know how tired you are right now, but you're making assumptions about me and stuff. And so I just left it at that. But it felt, at that point I felt, and I was kind of describing this to Will earlier. I felt like I was in a sunken place from Get Out. But also I had another friend of mine that kind of commented on that. Like, I think I screen capped it and I posted it on my Instagram. And then another white friend of mine basically said, stop generalizing white people. It's low key rude and, stuff like that. So at that point, that's what really got me like really upset, because first I'm now like basically kind of trying to make a statement with this political cartoon that I have found about like the current situation between black and white, black and white. Sorry, I'm like words. I'm not doing words right now. I'm sorry, I'm like laughing, but I can't do words right now. I'm losing my train of thought already. But I think that the main thing is that I don't know what the main thing is. Will, help me.
You're focusing. Well, you're talking about the relationship between black and white people.
Yes.
And basically like and acknowledging, like, because here's the thing, you didn't intend for it to be a disrespectful thing, and the reason why you responded that way is also because he was starting to generalize a very specific topic.
Yes.
And that was the problem.
Yes.
And then
he was de-escalating. He was de-escalating, or de something words.
And then, and actually, it's kind of funny. It's kind of funny now that I realize that now we're talking about it, how it seemed very minuscule, but I saw some victimization in there. I saw some claiming of like, oh, I didn't intend this. I didn't want to do this. Like, my intentions were not, read correctly.
Yeah.
And that tends to happen whenever,
Yeah, he was like, I wasn't trying to make this a race thing. And I'm like, but I literally posted a post about race.
It's a racial politics.
Yeah. So, and then he said something along the lines of like, he was trying to like put the front up about him not even living in America. And I was like, that don't mean anything. If anything, I mean, if there's anything about the history of our country, you should at least know why I'm #tired, which was the only thing I posted as my caption under that picture, by the way. But he was like, I don't know why you're so tired. And I'm like, really? Please don't play dumb. Anyway. But
I mean, he hit you with the classic I don't see color.
Yes.
That's all it really is. And like, if you can say that, then if I could say I don't see color in like a negative or an oppressed way, then I could say I don't see color in a privileged way. Easy cop out,
Well, yep, very true.
Yeah.
And he deleted the comment on that page, by the way, because I didn't. And I looked the other day and I was like, oh, it's not there anymore. Thank goodness I screen capped it. Anyway, and also from my other friend who was like, well, he's a coworker of mine, but his comments was like, well, not everything's about color or not everything's about race, though. Stop categorizing white people as rude. But I'm thinking to myself, like, why not right now? Because of everything that's kind of going on. Like, you literally had like all these instances, not all these instances of white people killing black people, but and getting away with it technically, like just thinking about like the history is just very, it can be really upsetting, especially when this is another podcast episode about like just even us having the education about, you know, what our Black people have gone through after slavery here. Like, and like you really don't really get a chance unless you are like, there was this quote, I don't know if it was Amanda Seals or somebody said it, but it was like, you know, white privilege is being able to learn about your history in history class, and me learning about my history in an elective, like as an elective or something like that. And I was like, that's true. But I don't know. I was going off. I think I'm derailing, not completely, but thank you so much again for like being here. Like I'm again like rambling, and this is kind of how the podcast goes. I'm so excited for everybody to see this one and listen to this one, and I can say see now because we're actually going to be putting this online. So
people are going to see me.
Yes, they are going to see you, Andy. That's okay. We all look great. Like it's if you want to like.
Everybody looks lighting a little bit though.
Yeah. Change the lighting.
Oh snap! Snap! Come on, Andy.
Yeah, and he just moved. He's in a house now. Like he just got his first house. It's awesome. True. That's so cool. So let me see where I'm at. This is so. What are your thoughts on me and like other folks calling out and categorizing white people out like in a lump sum? Like, do you think it makes us just as bad? And Will, you can chime in on this too, but I'll ask Andy first. Just the categorizing of white people. Like, I'm always like, especially when I post, I'm like, dear white people, or like, hey white people, or something. You know, like I'll definitely like call them out before I like start talking and saying the rest.
I mean, let me put it this way: I've never seen a statement or a social media post or heard a comment like that I thought, oh no, that doesn't apply to all of us. Like that's never happened. You know what I mean? So I don't think when it comes to talking about systemic racism, I don't think there's any issue in grouping white people into a lump sum when you're talking about something that we all benefit from. And again, like when it comes to and again, it's like the idea of intersectionality or whatever. We all have a lot of different factors in our life. So when you group white people into a statement regarding race, that's one thing that we all have in common. You know what I'm saying? So it's like if you say, I don't know, it would be different if you said like, oh, white people have never had to worry about whether they can pay their bills or something like that. It's like, well, no, there's a lot of poor ass white people out there.
Right.
So,
right.
But yeah, so it's, you know, when you're talking about issues of race, it's like, yeah, it is a little bit more inclusive. It is something that basically affects all white people. So it's like, yeah, I mean, you can lump us together.
Okay, cool.
And I guess the other part of your question is like whether that's just as bad or the same or whatever. I don't think it is, because oftentimes when people of color are lumped together, it's with some sort of negative connotation that doesn't affect all of them. You know what I mean? It's like when people call like black men thugs. It's like, no, not all black men are thugs, but they'll generalize that way. And then someone says, all white people benefit from privilege. And you go, oh no, you can't generalize us all like that.
Yeah.
That's a totally different thing.
Yeah. Hooey. All right. And Will, do you have anything to add to that?
I mean, I'll probably just say that that in those situations, it's definitely where they are. It's definitely where white people can take it as an attack on who they are rather than what they benefit from or what they do. And it's really easy in those situations where it's just like, oh, like you said, Andy, it's just like, oh, like not all white people benefit from privilege. Well, it's just like, you do, but don't take it personal, but you do. Like, you know, like
right. It's just a fact. It's just a fact.
It's like, yeah.
Right.
And the other thing too is I feel like sometimes people take that as like an all-encompassing thing. Like if you say that I benefit from privilege, sometimes some people take that as, oh, you're saying everything I have is because of my privilege. Which is like, no, you're not necessarily saying that. Um I guess just to stick with myself as an example, it's like I work really hard. I put in a
Mhm.
lot of hours every week and whatever. So when someone says I benefit from white privilege, they're not saying that I never worked hard. They're not saying that I've never struggled. They're not saying that um, whatever successes or status or whatever I have in life is only because of white privilege. So I think that's another barrier where sometimes people take things personally that um, aren't personal accusations, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a definite subject matter as far as like mutual exclusion. It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Cool. So, do y'all think there are cultural differences between white and black people that makes it difficult for them to communicate and listen to each other? Um, do you? I feel like there are, but I think personally, like for me, I know that black people are very passionate speakers. They love to be loud. And I know for certain white people, I know like with my boyfriend, it was kind of something that kind of was jarring. And I definitely, when I met his family, they're very quiet when they talk. They're not nearly as loud. Like, so I had to get used to that. I'm like, dang, everyone's so quiet. But like me, I'm like, all over the place. So it's like, not all over the place. I mean, sometimes I am, but I noticed that especially like the different dynamics of family. Now, not all white families are quiet. I'm just saying, like, at least the ones that when it comes to me having to speak to white people about certain things, even if it's like in the work setting, I have to come in with a different, I have to code switch in a way, and it's not how I would normally speak to someone about something that I just want to get out. Like I have to now think and be meticulous about how I say it, and not necessarily just because I'm trying to keep my job or whatever, but it's because I know I'm speaking to a white person who is not going to understand or address me if I get really passionate about like what I'm saying. Like I have to keep my tone at a specific level in order to discuss it. So I think that's one thing on my end. But do y'all have anything?
Um, I think that again, in a way, it definitely, and we kind of touched on this before, how it deals with the audience that you're talking to. Um, I think it's like a very big thing with that. And then as far as like difficulties, I honestly feel as though it really comes down to someone acknowledging or being self-aware of the fact that they're not perfect and they're not, you know, supposed to be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And in some ways, I definitely feel as though there's some things with like some white people where like, there's maybe, I don't know, there might be this subconscious idea that like, oh, perfection, like I have to do everything right. And especially when it comes to regards to how, they want to be an ally. We talked about this before, just like, oh, I don't want to get involved in topics about racism because what if I do it wrong? So I'm just not going to say anything
Mm-hmm.
at all.
Right.
And
And I think there's these stigmas. I should also say there's also stigmas, especially in the black community, at least, where it's like, if you come off this way, you'll be like the angry black woman or something like that. So you don't want to be categorized as that, because then that they're already like putting you in a category and they're not listening to you because they've already put you in this category. You know what I mean?
right,
Yeah.
exactly. I definitely feel as though it comes down to just being aware of yourself. I mean, honestly, it's really hard to have a discussion with someone when they're already on a defensive.
Yeah.
It's really hard to have a discussion with someone when they don't see themselves making mistakes, even mistakes that they don't see. Like in my own experience, like sometimes I'll do something that I didn't realize was bad,
Mm-hmm.
but when they address it to me, either I can be like, oh, I didn't intend to do that. I didn't like, I'm sorry, my bad. Or I can be like, I didn't do that. That wasn't my intention. And there's like multiple ways that you can take it. So especially when you're like having these discussions, what can be difficult is just people not acknowledging the fact that they're human and that they're going to make mistakes and that they are or not opening themselves up to trying to address those things.
Heard. Cool. Andy, anything?
Andy.
I don't know. I think y'all hit it pretty good.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you hit on intention, Will, because again, going back to like people taking things personally in conversations about race, I think sometimes people will get on the defensive very quickly because they didn't intend to offend a person of color.
Mm.
And the first several times I heard the term microaggressions, I was like, I have no idea what that means.
Yeah,
What
no,
even is
same.
that? And then when someone, when someone explained it to me, or when I like read up enough to kind of at least sort of understand what it was, I still don't always see it. And I'm sure at times I'm guilty of, microaggressions against people of color. And if I get called out on it, but it wasn't my intention, sometimes that makes people, like you said, go on the defensive real quick.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, we just have to, that's just the one thing that drives me so crazy is like, white people get so defensive in these conversations sometimes. And it's like, no one's saying you're a bad person. No one's saying, anything bad about you or whatever. And intention really at a certain point doesn't matter that much. Whatever you did. And if it made someone feel this way or that way, like that's reality. So.
Right. Facts. Ooh. Man, we're not even done yet. We getting there, but oh man. So what should white people be listening for from a person of color if they are like talking and like trying to like basically speak their piece? Maybe not speak their piece, but like basically like speak out about these injustices. Like, what are the key things that a white ally should look or listen to? Like, if they can't listen to anything else because they're like getting defensive because of X, Y, and Z, what should they be listening for?
You know what? I'm gonna definitely let Andy take the reins on this one. But I will say first that honestly, in my head, I don't even feel as though they can listen for anything specifically if they don't even have the intention just to listen in general.
Yeah.
It's just like you,
but like somebody that's like, okay, let's say you've like you've set aside a time with like a white person to talk about race in general, just to like, and this black person is speaking their piece. They're speaking about things that they're like going through or X, Y, and Z. Like, what are the key things that white people should take from that? Because I know, at least in some instances where I've done that, people have taken different things from it and they'll apply it in certain ways. Some of them correctly, some of them incorrectly. I don't know. So what would be like the main things that you would feel need to be taken from the conversation? I think like as a person of color, I think one of the main things that should be taken from is like feelings. I feel like feelings, like being able to, because I only say feelings because that is something that I know a white person can empathize with, because we all feel the same things. We can feel like, if I say I felt scared here, what it feels like to feel scared. If I felt angry, like, like saying stuff like that, because that kind of at least tries to put it into perspective for them, even if they can't understand why you were angry because they haven't experienced it, but they can at least feel it. So I think that's one of my big things. I'll make sure I tell them how I feel.
Yeah. You actually just led right into what I wanted to say, because I think what it's really important for us to listen to is the things that we can't see or feel ourselves. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's just a lot, as a white, especially as a straight white male, there's just a lot of experiences that I've never had and will never have. There's a lot of challenges and issues that I've never faced. So like certain things, if we're talking about police brutality, right? We could both look up the same statistics.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Google.
It's like, right, like we can both read the same books, we can both do some of the same things, but like actually living those experiences and, like you said, having those feelings in that moment of that experience, like that's something we will never do. So I think that's the most important thing for white allies and for white folks to listen to is just like the stuff that we will never experience on our own or read or see somewhere.
Yeah, you know what? I'll add to that the main word empathy. And with empathy, you cannot empathize without listening. So so you definitely have to take that moment to truly listen to those feelings, and as best as you can, like, you know, as people, we're given this thing called imagination. You know, being white, you'll never truly experience that, but you can empathize, and you can kind of have an idea and connect those feelings.
Right.
One of
Another.
the,
Oh, go ahead.
sorry. One of the things I think is really hard though is like, I don't know how you get someone to empathize. I don't know how you teach somebody to empathize. Like, I was just fortunate growing up that I had some good examples in my life. Like, my mom was a great one, my sister. You know, I had a lot of people in my life who really, I saw them empathize with people whose experiences were different than their own. And that's how I learned how to do it. So I don't know how you teach an adult who didn't have that example growing up to empathize, you know.
That takes therapy.
You know what? That definitely takes therapy, and it definitely takes money for therapy. Yeah. But I'll probably say, as far as that, there's it really depends on who you're talking to, and it depends on what the foundation for the relationship is. Because honestly, a lot of the things how we teach people is basically by modeling, and in many situations, I feel like I can't really talk to a stranger or address, you know, empathy to a stranger as I would to someone that I know personally. So definitely, like, you know, it depends on who you're talking to. But I also feel as though, you know, modeling certain behaviors is, you know, the best way to do it if you want to kind of teach someone about empathy, because they notice how they feel when you empathize with them, and they'll have something to connect it to where that they can perform that for someone else. That's like as best as I got. I ain't got anything.
That's good. I'm gonna start paying you for therapy.
Oh, come on. Start a business, Will.
Hey, I'm thinking about it.
I think there was one more thing I wanted to say, which white people should be listening to from the first thing I said was like feelings, but also, especially if this is a conversation that you're just having with one white person, it's not like a whole group of them. But even if it is a whole group, honestly, like if you are a person of color that feels confident enough to be able to tell all these white people off at the same time about something that maybe they did to you or something, hopefully that they'll like be allied enough to like listen to you. I would definitely say give them examples of times that they weren't there for you or something of that nature. Like give them a concrete thing, like, you remember this time? Well, this is how I felt there, and this is what you could have done, you know. So I think also just like recapping experiences would help as well. But I wish I would have actually written down a list, because I wasn't actually thinking that I was going to answer these questions, which I should have done that, but you know, whatever. So my next question, however, is more of a question for me and Will. What do you think persons of color should be listening for from a white ally? Like, what do you think we should be listening for to say, oh, this person's a white ally? I already gave my example.
I mean, I had a whole section about this earlier before Annie even got here. And I can't wait for you to hear it. But I would definitely say, you know, just being self-aware, but I would say self-aware with your own feelings. I think that's a major thing that people have to realize. And what we kind of expressed before was that, you know, white allies have to be self-aware. They have to be in tune with their feelings. They have to acknowledge the fact that when they do stand against racism, it's not going to be comfortable. It's not going to be, you're not going to feel great. You're going to feel very vulnerable.
Yeah.
And again, that's something that, you know, that's how Black people feel all the time. And that's only a percentage of what they feel. But,
right.
But I definitely feel as though I look for effort. I look for effort, and I look for growth. I don't anticipate someone to just be the grade A 100% like ally, you know, like that's just like whatever. It's a process, but it's a process that you have to do consistently. And again, I say that it takes practice. It takes practice to be a good ally. You can't just be like, oh, I'm going to be on today, then tomorrow, I'm tired. That took a lot of me. I got to take a day off. No, you can't take a day off.
Yeah.
Like, can we take a day off? No, so you can't take a day off. So you have to acknowledge the fact that it is a process. Is that it takes time, it takes practice, it takes patience, and it takes listening, and it takes effort of all things. Like, just try.
Effort, yeah. I think also, especially in the beginning stages, if you're going to try to at least become an ally, I think you have to have the ability to agree to disagree, because sometimes, you know, you're still trying to process those things yourself. That maybe some things that your person of color friend or ally is saying you're not necessarily believing or like agreeing with, and you have to know when to just, you know, call and say, I will agree to disagree and we can talk about this later, and like, you know, put this to the side for now, and then like come back once, you know, you've really had like a generalized, you've had time to think about it.
You know, I'm going to piggyback off that and say that, and it kind of connects to the podcast that I had us listen to just about, like, you know, apologizing. But I definitely feel as though, you know, white allies should ask, you know, their friends of color to set aside a time to talk about these things. Like, I don't really feel as though there's ever the actual effort. It's only when somebody gets shot. It's only when somebody posts something on Facebook. It's only when, like, you know, we have these opportunities that we want to actually have this discussion.
Right.
Like,
and you should be reaching out. Yeah. You should be reaching out like in the quieter times, just so that when all hell breaks loose again, you already got your armor ready because you prepared.
Right.
I feel so cathartic right now. Yeah, I will respect a person more if they can at least understand that they are in a mental spot where they have to agree to disagree. Because I could do that too. I'm like, you know, I'll have a conversation with somebody who I know's beliefs are completely 180 of mine, and know that there is a time to just like put it all away for a second and just be like, yo, I agree to disagree. Thanks for having this conversation. You know, still appreciate you, but I know we don't have, we see different ways. It is what it is. Because in the end, you still got to treat this person, they're human, and they're only, you know, you can only go off of your own experiences. And it's just, that's why we're having this conversation now. We're trying to bridge that gap of experiences to like make it more accessible and understanding for all parties involved. So back going.
Question.
Yes.
Does we get questions?
Yeah, you can ask plenty of questions. I love when y'all ask questions.
So, a question for you: like, if you're having a conversation with someone and maybe you get to that point where you just can't seem to see eye to eye, and like you reach the agree to disagree point, do you feel like you can trust that person after that? After you reach that point?
I can, as long as that person is also willing to just like put it on the side. I think I can trust them to know that I at least respect them enough because they've also taken it upon themselves, you know, to pause as well.
You know, I'll even add on to that. I feel like when I think of like trust, and I think of when I think of respect, I kind of like have the idea that you know, a jar is represented as, you know, respect. I mean, ultimately, you can't really have trust for someone if you don't respect someone. So I see the jar as respect, and then, you know, you have one marble of trust that you put in over time. You know, everyone's level of trust is different. So you kind of have to approach it differently for everyone, because there are some white people that I can trust to say, these white people today have just like pissed me off, and there's some other people who you don't trust. So the thing about trust is that, you know, you always want to make sure that you don't floodlight someone, and you want to make sure that when it comes to trust, that you're entrusting someone who deserves to hear your story.
Ooh.
Don't just talk
You
to
can't just tell
anyone.
anyone. Yeah.
You can't just tell anyone. You want to ensure that you're having these conversations with someone that you do trust and who has filled up the trust jar.
Yes. Love it. Hope that answered your question, Andy.
Yeah.
Cool. So going back to kind of social media stuff, I wanted to know your thoughts on like instances where social media blows up like partial information on a modern day lynching per se, like with the whole Ahmaud Arbery situation. Like we all saw like what happened to him, but then they posted a video later on about him possibly going into someone's house like
Falls under
afterwards.
construction.
Yeah, that was under construction or whatever. And so like now people are like, oh, maybe, you know, like now they're playing devil's advocate in a way, you know, like they're like, well, does this mean that he was actually doing something bad before he got killed and that's why they killed him? Like, is his killing justified now that he was actually going and intruding someone else's house?
No, it's not. It's not.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. I think that this is a situation where people, here's the thing. I feel like for some people, it doesn't matter how many facts you have. They're still going to be against it. They're still going to say that it was warranted.
Yep.
And I definitely feel like we have to get down to the core issue, which is that he was killed for doing nothing.
Yeah.
For doing nothing. Like, yeah, you might like look at the house or whatever. If I was talking to somebody and I was like, oh, I'm just like, you know, walking around the neighborhood, but I'm doing nothing. That's nothing to me. He wasn't doing anything.
Right.
And the idea, you know, of them saying like, oh, was it wrong? Like,
but you don't
more evidence.
Yeah.
You like, we don't need evidence. We don't need evidence for that. And in a way, and what's even weirder to me, and I know I'm kind of like going off right now, but it kind of connects definitely to, you know, how police officers have been, you know, reacting to Black people, because again, it's like the same thing. A lot of times they act and there's no evidence and they just react to nothing. And I feel like it's gotten to the point where evidence, why we got to have evidence now when he's already dead? Like what's the point? Like you're trying to like set a narrative based on the
right. It's like in the end he still got
he's
killed.
Gone. Yeah,
someone still killed him. So it's like anything that
evidence
led
for the
up to it, you
narrative,
still
not for justice.
you took initiative to kill someone. Like you took initiative whether or not he was going into, like, even if it's like a robber was going into a, I don't know, like trying to rob a store or whatever. Most of the time they don't kill them. They want to like get more information from them, at least in jail, before they do anything. Like I mean, I understand self-defense, whatever, but these people were just like out on a hunt, like a deer hunt, trying to kill this guy in a way. So anyway, back to the actual question. Sorry. I wanted to know, you know, in instances like that, not just like Ahmaud, but like other people where like other stuff has come out after like the main event video of them dying, that people are like, or even in the instance where like what's his face from that passed away, or not passed away, he got killed in Baton Rouge, what's his name?
Alton Sterling.
Yes, Sterling. I think they were talking about like how he was drug dealing or something beforehand, so they were like, oh well, he justified to die because he was drug dealing or something, like trying to justify them being killed. Like, what are y'all thoughts on it?
Well, the ironic thing is that pretty much every time the people who bring up the, oh well, he was committing this crime or that crime, or they shouldn't have been doing this, they're the same people who go so hard for the Constitution when they feel like one of their rights is being stepped on.
Ooh.
And so it's like, oh, we'll stick with the Ahmaud Arbery example for now, but like, let's say he did go into this house he wasn't supposed to be in. Does that mean he all of a sudden loses his right to a trial and to representation and all of this stuff?
Right.
They'll say, well, he shouldn't have done this if he didn't want this outcome or whatever. It's like, well, you go so hard for your rights and your amendments during these time. His right to all that stuff was just taken away.
Right.
You know?
Woo! Come on.
Yes, Andy. And you know what? The issue here, I feel like, with those men in particular, is this idea that white people have a country to protect and that it belongs more to them than it
You're
does to
talking about the one
everyone
we
else.
stole, right? That one?
That one. As a matter of fact, we talking about the same one. And
All
we talking
right.
about the
Just
same.
making
I
sure. Just
see
making
you.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah, that one.
You're on a trip. Oh my gosh. Okay. So man, I hate having to like just keep continuing these questions, but like if I don't finish these questions, we ain't gonna ever be done this conversation. And y'all know, like I'm serious, like it's so I'm not tired about talking about it with y'all, but that's because we all have like the same mindset about it, and we all are like, I feel like we're very self-aware, which is why I have y'all on here to like be able to discuss all of this. So like I'm not feeling tired talking to y'all because and I thank y'all again. I'm gonna keep thanking y'all that y'all are actually here talking with me about this for now, at least with Will. I've been saying 2.5 hours. but but it's been worth it.
Stamina.
It has been worth it, and I wouldn't trade it at all for anything I was doing today, even making masks. Anyway, so when engaging on social media, when engaging in online rhetoric on social media about racial issues, what tactic do you find is most effective in curating a healthy discussion? I know for me, I normally, when it comes to my thing is I love to write and I love to use big words sometimes. And so like the high school I went to, the predominantly white high school, they had a very good English program. So I learned I dotted my I's, crossed my T's, and knew where I put my commas and my apostrophes, and like I knew all that. And I actually did really well in English. But the thing is like when it comes to me discussing and like just being eloquent about it, I never really had an issue with that. Like I was always able to really like with my vocabulary, I was able to eloquently talk about these issues. And I feel like at least at that time, 2013, 2014, whenever like Trayvon, that was 2012 actually. Yeah. Everything that happened with Trayvon, like I would start speaking out, but like the way I was speaking out wasn't necessarily just blanket statements like all white people are racist or something like that, or like white people this, white people that. Like I was like going into depth. I would start off with like slavery, and then I'll like go down the timeline or something like that, or I would just basically be using like everyday examples really. And I feel like a lot of people that I was following at the time weren't, but I honestly was just kind of trying to describe it the way that I had always seen it, and I just never really described it to others. I did to like my black friends for the most part, but I think the other thing is when I'm discussing things with my black friends, like it's very easy to just like we already know what's going on. Like we can spot racism a mile away, and we don't have to necessarily be like, oh, that person's being racist. We just know. We'll just look at each other like, like literally. And so it's like, I don't know where I was going with this. I don't remember what I was going with this.
I mean, if I could chime in, what I was picking up, at least where I thought you were headed, was like you kind of have to, I think, meet people where they're at, you know? So in conversations with certain people, you could start with slavery and go through the whole timeline and be really deep about it. You know, I find certainly for myself talking to like people I grew up with in a very white community, you know, we learned from all the same textbooks that I would probably cringe or cry reading today. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's like someone who is still there, who doesn't have many, if any, black friends or whatever, or hasn't had a ton of these type of conversations. It's like you kind of have to meet them in a different place if the conversation is going to go anywhere. Because sometimes if you start too deep or too far along, you lose them right off the bat.
Right.
You know?
Right. That's exactly what I was trying to say. because I reread my question. I was like, yeah, that was it. I have to meet them at where they are. It's so true. Like that was literally it. Like, and I know a lot of my, at least at that time, 2012, like that was 2 years after I graduated high school. Most of my friends on Facebook were like people from my high school, which were mostly white and stuff of that nature. So it was like having to start there and just like kind of branch out. It was hard. It was hard, but you know, now we're here in 2020, 8 years later, and I feel a lot. I've definitely like burned bridges with people for good reason though. Like, oh, I didn't mention this earlier, but as I was talking to Will, I would say there was this one instance with my high school a couple of years ago, say about 3 years ago. But basically there was a father-daughter dance that was going on, and in the father-daughter dances that they normally have at this high school, normally the fathers and daughters will like usually dress up in like this cute little like costumes. Usually they're matching or whatever. I've never actually gone to the father-daughter dances, but like I've seen pictures and I just heard about it like throughout my time there. But in this instance, about 2 years ago, there was a senior and her father at the time that dressed up as Kaepernick and Trump. And somehow that no one like batted an eye, I guess, for a while. I'm actually, I should say, I was not there, so I don't know the whole story. All I know is that there were pictures taken, and I think they kind of curated through Snapchat, and it got to the wrong person, and now there was like this big backlash online about it, and then it even got to the news. Like that's how bad it was. And I remember that whole issue, like just with that, and then like everything that kind of branched off from it. I was getting me and two other girls that I went to school with, we were very vocal about it. We even went on the radio and everything talking about it and just trying to get that word out, and like people wanting to know, like Black people all around the city wanting to know like what was being taken, like what the school was doing to take responsibility for what had happened. And you know, I think just us going on these like larger outlets made people upset that we were going to that measure to like try to defend Black people in a way, because that was not right. The picture that they had was like the daughter was Kaepernick, the dad was Trump. Kaepernick was kneeling and Trump was like pointing at him. Someone took a picture of that from the dance and then like sent that around. And I can't honestly remember right now picture wise if the kid, or if the kid, the senior, had dressed in blackface or not. I don't think she did though. I think she clearly was Kaepernick though. Like she had the whole get up and everything, but I just thought that was so tasteless. And the thing is like there are administrators and supervisors there that kind of check. They always check what you're wearing before you go in. Like this is a private Catholic all girls school. Like you can't even go in there with a high skirt or anything. You get sent home. But like this instance where like you got a father-daughter coming in, like you didn't check that costume before they went into the dance hall or whatever. Like it was baffling. And I know a lot of people in the entire community of the high school was upset. And I know there were some tiffs between like some of the students, like the Black students and the white students. From what I've heard, I've made good friends with some of the Black students, at least, because I was kind of concerned. I wanted to hear from their perspective what was going on, because I know being a Black student at the time, like it's very difficult in that kind of space to kind of speak up for yourself or really even understand the shock, like I was saying earlier with Will, like the shock factor of it all. Like these things are happening, but you're not being able to really live in it real time because you're still trying to process what just happened. So like just kind of talking to them and, you know, making sure that they were okay. I know there were some other instances where like, you know, some of the other white seniors were getting on them. There were a bunch of the white seniors that were trying to friend me on Facebook, trying to like just be messy and like everything. It was a whole ordeal. And I don't know why I went on this whole tangent about that, but now y'all know some more information about why I'm so adamant about racial injustice and why I'm #tired. So Do y'all have anything to say to that? Do y'all have any comments? No? Okay. All right. Oh man. So I'll go to my next question. What is the preferred mindset of a successful, uncomfortable racial discussion, either in person or online? You know what? This is a question that I think we already answered.
Did we? What did we say?
I thought we did.
What would he say?
So like having a preferred mindset, like you have to be like kind of like what I told y'all before we started this, before like we came on to do this. I said like, okay, get your tea, make sure you breathe, make sure you like are comfortable, like make sure that you're in a good mindset before you even have these conversations. Like have your points together, but be open and ready to listen to the other person. Don't be listening to react. Listen to just listen.
Yeah, I think any conversation about anything these days, whether it's race, whether it's something social, political, whatever, like we just always I think everyone needs to enter these conversations with the mindset that we might be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like a lot of people don't do that anymore. You know what I'm saying? Like people really dig their heels in. And I don't know, maybe it's always been that way. And just as I get older, I notice it more, or I encounter it more. But it's like a lot of us just aren't willing to accept that we might be wrong and try to see things from the other point of view.
Yeah.
I almost kind of feel like, to piggyback off what Andy said, and like, not wanting to be wrong. I think particularly with, when it comes to racism, and we deal with like, the white people who are racist, a lot of them fall onto religion to back up their claims. And that whole idea as far as being right all the time. That whole idea as far as like, religion in general can just be very arrogant, and that can bleed into your mentality when you address any other topic. So I think that's definitely something that should be considered as well. Sorry, I might have gone off on a different thing.
No, you're fine. No, that was great. That was perfect. So if we're going to successfully continue bridging this racial inequality gap, what needs to happen in our society or our societies first? I feel like it's already happening. I feel like we are, again, having these conversations, a 3-hour-long podcast about how we could do these things. So I think just our ability to just have these conversations, that like having the mindset that we just kind of talked about, like being able to get into that space to be able to discuss things and like express our feelings and everything. I feel like there's just a comfortability level that needs to be there first before anything can happen. Trust levels and everything.
I'd probably say that that people should actively look for connections outside of their circle and actively try to involve themselves in areas that aren't predominantly, their race, their color, their background.
Yes.
I think, especially when you're trying to grow, the only way for you to grow is to get out of your comfort zone. The only way you can get out of your comfort zone is to step away from what you already know. And if you don't have a background, or if you don't have an understanding of a certain background or race, then maybe you should start to connect with those groups and those communities, and then you'll have a better idea.
Without the intention of being overbearing, like do it, but like, because I know that
just be there, just be in the room, dude. Just be in the room.
But don't try to shine because you're the only white person there or something. Don't try to Columbus yourself in there. Just be.
Sounds like Jessica is speaking from personal experience right now. Don't do it. Don't do it.
But I mean, even in this space, like Andy was all like, because he was like, I really want y'all to like be able to have y'all space to talk before I come on, and I was just like, just come down. He's just like, no, yeah, I want to have like y'all have that time, and I was like, much respect, because like, that's. I'm sorry, Andy. I'm like, I want to hear what Andy has to say.
She loves you, Andy. She loves you dearly.
You're good. I think as far as things that need to happen, like on a bigger scale for things to start changing, I think some of them are already happening, like you said, or maybe Will said. I don't remember which one of y'all said it, but a couple things I think that are changing the game, like social media is obviously one. Like
Oh
all of a
yeah.
sudden, we can literally instantly communicate with people who come from totally different backgrounds than us. And I think travel, in a sense, is another. And not everybody has the opportunities or the means for like world
Traveling.
travel or
Yeah.
even around the states travel, but it's um, just getting into kind of like you said, Will, getting into spaces other than like where you grew up and where you came from and all that.
Yeah.
I I maybe I'm being pessimistic, but I honestly feel that if I had chosen to stay in the small town I grew up in, like if I had chosen to just stay there and live my whole life there, I don't think I would be in a place to have this conversation, honestly, because a lot of what I've learned has come from getting out of my comfort zone, getting out of both both in a physical sense and in a non-physical sense, just being in new places, being around people who are different from me. And I think that's something that's starting to happen a lot more. I think like our parents' generation, a lot of folks I think really stayed exactly where they were from and spent their whole lives there. And there's a lot about that that's really cool. There's a lot of aspects of that that's great. But I think our generation and folks younger than us are a lot more mobile because we're able to be. Travel's a little bit cheaper. Communication is easier with the internet and all that. So I think just people getting into um, uncomfortable and different environments and stuff is what will really start to change the dynamic.
Yeah. And I've always like encourage my white friends who I know don't ever hang around black people. I'm always encouraging them find a black friend or like be in black spaces and stuff. Like I usually give them some like suggestions of places, but you gotta also be really mindful of like which spaces you ask them to like, or like you encourage them to go to, because not all of them are going to be nearly as welcoming, because they like black spaces are important for us, and they want to still be sacred, and like there's still like a vibe that can only be found like if white people aren't there. It's so interesting because like even when I'm like at my church, when I was growing up at my church and like one white person would show up, everything would change.
Everybody like,
Like the whole church
everybody
just,
turn around.
but not even that. They don't turn around. Like they'll turn around and know who's there, and then they start acting a little differently. Like there's just a different persona about how everybody starts to act, and it's like very weird. No one ever addresses it, but it's just there's just a different vibe. It's not the same. So like I think, yeah.
I think another thing to kind of like add into that, like, and we did touch on, comfortability, but I think an even deeper thing, which, if y'all know Brene Brown, y'all know where I'm going. But getting used to being vulnerable is a very important thing. Everything, regarding, having these deep conversations, like, talking to, the people that you love that might be racist, like, talking to Samaya, blah, blah, blah. At the end of the day, you have to understand that you can't be courageous without being vulnerable. You have to put yourself in that situation. You have to acknowledge that, you know what, this is going to be tough. This is going to be rough, but I'm courageous right now for putting myself in a vulnerable situation that I know would only bring about positivity and could possibly better this world.
Right.
And people have to understand that it's not always going to be easy. These conversations aren't easy. These conversations are really fucking difficult.
You're good.
I try my best not to curse this whole time, because I curse like a sailor. I try my best. But damn it. But we definitely have to acknowledge that everything comes from vulnerability. Everything that we want, everything that we can't get in our current space, we have to allow ourselves to be vulnerable, and be vulnerable with people who are allowed to hear our story and deserve
Yeah.
it.
vulnerability is cathartic in any instance, not just with race, but just like anything. I've noticed
Everything.
the most growth I have had is whenever whenever I am allowing myself to be vulnerable about something with someone or even to myself. Like it's just so nice. And I think that's why, and I always encourage my people with self-aware millennial to find a therapist, because that just changes the whole game. Your whole life just, it feels like you can control your life versus your life controlling you, you know? So.
It brings about honesty. Like,
Yeah.
and if you really want to get down to like, the core of it and like, and wanting to know what the truth is, you have to be vulnerable enough to hear the hard truth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think, Will, you kind of hit on this earlier, but like the only way you get better at anything is by practicing it. As a music teacher, I spend a lot of time talking about that. But it's the same with like being vulnerable and being in, uncomfortable spaces and stuff like that. Like it's not easy and you're not good at it right off the bat, I mean, think about anything else you try in your life. How often are you good at something the first time you do it or the second time you do it? So
well, no, I'm kidding.
Maybe you.
Keep going, Andy. Keep going.
Oh my gosh! All right, y'all. So finally, we're actually on another segment of this podcast. But this is kind of wrapping things up. But before we wrap things up, I have a segment called Ask J.Mix, where I have anyone that wants to talk to me or like not give me advice, but I give them advice. Or like give, like if they have a story or something that they want to ask, this is just that time for me. But also it's Ask J.Mix, but it's basically ask J.Mix and everybody who is with her right now. So if y'all want to chime in, feel free. But one of them I got from a friend on mostly over Instagram, but I kind of sort of know her personally. I've met her a few times, but she wanted to know, she said, I always wonder why race is always necessary. I think she kind of typoed this. Let me see if I can figure this out. I always wonder why race is always a necessary subject. I understand there is evil racism. It exists, unfortunately, in more than the white race or religion or sex, etc. But can we sometimes see the soul? Oh, wait, shoot, I'm totally reading this wrong. But can't we sometimes see the soul, the spirit, Jeez, I cannot. You know what? I can't really read this that well because I think it's just the way it was written. I understood it when I read it, but I'm like, dang, actually reading it out loud, I was like, but can we sometimes see the soul, the spirit, the humanity? I know many people, including mine, oh gosh, y'all. Let me see if I can just sum this up. Gosh, you know what?
Take your time. You can edit.
All I know is that in this instance, I'm just gonna summarize it. She basically kind of asked, I don't see why. She basically said in her own words, I don't see why racism is a big deal. She basically said like why is it always a necessary subject right now or something like that. She was saying something along the lines of like how she has Black friends and family members and everything, and she said like if she lived,
is she Black or is she what is she?
You white.
I just had to make sure. I had to.
Yeah, no, she white.
Okay.
Could tell just by listening to the question.
Yeah, exactly. But I think honestly, in this instance, I told her that I was going to put this on the podcast and I was going to kind of talk about it. She realized after she sent the first thing that she realized that when she sent it to me that she was probably sending it in poor timing because of everything that was going on, like in the climate that we're living in right now with Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor, I believe. Is it Taylor? Breonna?
Taylor, yeah.
Yeah. And just everything. So, she kind of, she admitted that. And she said she's been the victim of racism. She's been the victim of reverse racism. That's something we didn't talk about. Andy's face.
How much longer you want this podcast to go?
Oh man. But she was like, no one talks about reverse racism. Let me see. Let me just get the highlights here.
It's hard to talk about something that doesn't exist.
And it is not all quote unquote white people. It hurts to think people believe that. Yeah. That's it. Now, you know what? I think from that information, y'all know
Yeah.
where we can go with this and how to give it like our
Andy, après-vous.
What's that?
You first.
Okay.
After you.
I think that question or parts of that question go right back to like what we were saying earlier. One of the biggest misconceptions is like racism versus prejudice. So maybe she was the victim of some sort of prejudice. That can happen, but like you can't be a victim of reverse racism when racism is like a system. and it's a one-way street. Like it's made to go one way. So
right.
Oh man, there was something else I wanted to say too, but I don't remember what it is. Go ahead. If one of y'all start talking, it'll come back.
Okay.
I'll add that that again, it's based on a system. And when she said, why do we have to talk about this, or why do you have to talk about this all the time? Because it affects every aspect of our lives. You have to understand that you can have two applicants, and one applicant that has a name Shaniqua versus an applicant that has a name Ashley are applying for the same job and they have the same credentials. Ashley is more likely to get the job just because of her name, because it sounds less black. You have to consider how many times a black family is trying to get a house in a white neighborhood and they're turned down because they're black. There are plenty of things in our lives that aren't just about when someone's killed. Racism affects us in every aspect of our lives, and you can't disregard that. So that's what I say to that.
I remember the other thing, which ties perfectly into what you just said, Will, but it's like like as white people, when it comes to talking about race, we can turn it on and turn it off. And that's like part of our privilege. We can decide to have a conversation. I'll just use a random example. We can decide to have a conversation about football and not talk about any of the racial issues in, a league that's owned by primarily white people and has primarily black players. And we can choose not to go down that, rabbit hole, but it's like people of color can't just flip a switch and say, you know what, I'm not gonna have all of these like experiences and thoughts and feelings today. Like
it's something that they live with every single day.
And that's I think something I think that a lot of white people feel is like, why is race being brought into everything? Well, because it's a part of everything, honestly.
I think, and I remember I know we kind of talked about comfortability, but I think in that instance, it's like a lot of black people are oppressed. And so they wake up oppressed and they're already like their day-to-day lives, like the people that they're around, even their family members they are succumbing to that oppression in different ways. And like, seeing like, I know like, especially me growing up, like just seeing like some of the women in my household, like just, kind of succumbing to the, like portions of the reason why they are the way that they are is because of how oppressed they've been throughout their lives, and like seeing their families before and like their ancestors. Like it's just overall like this trauma that just kind of carries on through our generations. And like having to see that, even if you're going to like the bus stop or like just even when people are like just seeing your own people suffering so much more than you see white people suffering. It's almost like, yes, black people are oppressed and they have to live through it, so they're trying every day to get out of that. White people aren't necessarily as nearly as their lives aren't nearly as traumatic in that way. I know I'm kind of generalizing in a way, but I would say that, yeah, I feel like white people have it easier on that front, because if a black person, even if let's say a black oppressed person and a white oppressed person were both to like apply for a job at the same time for the same position, they might probably hire the white person just because of, the color of their skin or something like that. I guess I should say. I don't know how to really describe it, but I think it's, again, a skin color factor. Even though we don't want it to be. We all don't want to see color. Though I love to see color. Color is beautiful. Like, clearly I'm wearing colorful get up right now. But yeah. Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said something about seeing it every day. And that's
it's a constant reminder. Like you're reminded when you wake up, oh shoot, I'm oppressed.
yeah. And obviously that's not a feeling that I know or that I ever will, in the same way that you do. But for like when I moved to New Orleans from small town Pennsylvania, it was like I started to see stuff every day that I never knew was like part of our world, you know? I remember like my school was out in the East, and I remember the first time I went to like pick up some students or drop off some students from some sort of some sort of band event or whatever, and the roads blew my mind. Like it was literally like playing a video game trying to drive through this neighborhood.
Yeah.
And I was like, holy whatever. It's like, holy shit. Like,
yeah.
I've never in my life seen a white neighborhood or a predominantly white neighborhood with infrastructure that was just left to decay. You know, so that's just like it's just one small example, but it's like seeing that type of stuff every day really changes your mindset a lot. And that's, I think, you know, when people ask like why is race brought into everything, I would say more often than not, those are people who don't see it in their own community or their own neighborhood or whatever. So it's not coming from necessarily like a bad place, but they just don't see it, so they don't realize that it's a reality or that it's still a reality or whatever.
Right.
And it's very easy not to embrace the fact that this whole country was founded on racism and it was built by racism. And especially when you consider going back to when everyone came over here, mass genocide of Native Americans. You want to talk about, you know, how did the White House come to be? Okay, well, we know they didn't have no, you know, big cranes no, it was Black people that built the White House.
Yeah.
There are plenty of what's the word I'm looking for? There are plenty of things this week. I'm going to use it. There are plenty of things that that people of color have done for this country, and it's funny to me how, you know, a lot of racist white people will feel as though they're more entitled to this country, and it's really and it's really unfortunate when they say that, you know, why do we have to talk about race all the time? Well, understand that while not understanding that their privilege is based on the fact that racism was used for their benefit prior to their birth.
Right. Amen.
Yeah.
Oh God, there was something I wanted to say on that. Like you literally just said something that I was like going to piggyback off of, but now I can't remember, and it's gonna bug me. But it's okay. Hopefully, I'll remember. Like as I'm like rewatching all this later, that's gonna be fun. Trying to like edit all this. Oh my gosh, y'all, this is gonna be like the marathon or like. Oh, I'm excited though. I'm really excited to like rewatch all of this. So I had one more thing from another friend of mine, which I did not write down, so I don't have to actually look at my phone finally. A good friend of mine, I never asked her if she wanted her name said, so I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to say her name, but she wanted to know, because we were talking earlier how I was going to be doing this and talking to y'all about racial discussion and how to like bridge the gap between white and Black people's communication skills and everything. She wanted to know, she was like, oh, y'all talking about religion? And I said, no, what do you mean? And she said, like, she was talking about like how the Black community, or I say like Black worship, is different than white worship in a way, in the way that we like express ourselves in the church, and like how we get our grievances and however out like in the church is much different, and just the way of how Black and white people praise and worship in a way. I would say not necessarily like as much these days, depending if you go to like a non-denominational church or whatnot, depending on the church you go to. But I would definitely say more oftentimes than not, especially in the city of New Orleans, most white people are Catholic, and so are black people here too. That's just a New Orleans thing. All I'll say is that in the black church, we're a lot more loud. We're very we shout, we like dance all over the place. People be running around the church like it, like we're like all over. And like I find in white churches or like more white themed churches, I don't know how to describe that. It's just like it's
They're more conservative.
More yeah, it's so like timid and
Boring.
silent and boring. Yes,
I grew up
Lenny
going
said
to a white Catholic church.
it.
You can say boring. It's okay.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, that's the thing. Like, I've grown up in both types of churches, so like I know the difference. And it's like, oh gosh, like we're talking about the same person, Jesus, and it's like we're definitely expressing him in different ways. It's like I feel like black people are like, Jesus is my friend, yeah, like where they literally like pretend like they act like it's like he's right there, like they're very much like a part of them. It almost seems like in more like white churches, it seems like it's more of like it feels very monotone. If that's the best word to explain.
I think I think predominantly white churches or more conservative churches, however you want to say it,
Mm-hmm.
Worship Jesus the same way that we celebrate President's Day. It's like it's about a white dude or a bunch of white dudes from 100 years ago or a couple thousand years ago or whatever who did something that we all think is great and then died, and now we like this is what we do now is we celebrate them and we like honor them. That's always, I mean, and
I get you though. I
I
see
should
it.
tell my background. Like I grew up going to a Roman Catholic church, and it's much more solemn and it's much more like it's more like
It's very routine in a way
it's
too.
yeah, but it's
But
also very like I always felt like religion. I shouldn't say I always felt. When I got older and started to like question religion and started to question church and all these different things, I started to realize that so much of it was based on like guilt and
yes.
yeah,
This is a whole other episode right here. Oh,
it was very based on guilt and based on like like not only did we all, well, I didn't personally, but not only did Adam and Eve sin and whatever, and Jesus died for their sins and all that type of stuff, but it's like any transgressions or whatever in our own life we needed to atone for and we needed to be guilty for. And it never
right.
had like, shouldn't say never, but only at certain times of the year did it have like a very celebratory vibe.
Ah, wow.
Well, I'll even add, like, especially taking those classes, like, in music history back in the day, and like, knowing how strict the church was. Um, the church has, the church can do it for positive or negative benefits, and it's all based on the idea of shame
Yeah.
and using shame to weaponize an idea that better promotes them as a go-to religion. I find that a lot of religions, they basically, especially when you talk about image, you know, black people will read the Bible and like really harp on the idea that, that Jesus was like dark skinned and like, had like thick woolly hair and all that kind of stuff. But then at the same time, if you go to other churches, Jesus is white and looked like he was in a Pantene commercial. So it's like everybody, pretty much what? so, so everybody likes to model um, the God that they praise after them, so that they have a better connection to them. And again,
Ooh.
this kind of goes back to what I said
Interesting.
before, as far as the arrogance of religion, in that, you saying, well, God will smite you and God will do this and God will do that. And
it's like, how can you tell me what God will do? Like, you ain't God. Anyway.
Right. And when I think, like, in order for us to kind of connect this to, like, racism, the idea as far as like how we have these visuals in these churches, and also with how powerful the art is used. I mean, you have to tell me, like, when I went to Paris and I went to the Notre Dame, and like seeing, like, the stained glass, but then at the same time realizing that, like, the stained glass was of Middle Eastern people who had fair skin. And it's such an ethereal thing, the art of it all, but then also the subject matter within that too. So you see a very high power individual with these lovely stained glass, like, art fixtures. But at the same time, you are therefore praising, someone who looks like you, who would be, the Catholic congregation.
Right.
So it's like you put your own image onto your God, and then you put it on a pedestal. And anyone who does not look like that God or you automatically block them off, and they are not a part of your religion or of peace or forgiveness or anything like that. I kind of went off a little bit, but
no, go ahead, Andy.
No, you go ahead. You go ahead.
No. Go ahead. I'm serious. You go ahead.
When you brought up religion, like, way earlier, Will, I was glad that you brought it up, and I almost, like, went down the rabbit hole, and I was like, you know what? Let me be disciplined. Like, that's not the question we're on right now. Let me just lay back. But I'm kind of glad that we circled back to it, because I think that a lot of people, black, white, whatever, I think believe that religion is the only source of goodness, and I think that's where a lot of stuff comes from. Like, I have people I grew up with, family members, whoever, who are, like, super religious, and because they're super religious, they feel like it's okay that they support Trump, or they feel like it's okay that they, I don't know, it's almost like they, sort of like you mentioned, you put someone that looks like you on a pedestal, and then you raise them up, and then as long as you worship them, you're good. Like, it doesn't matter too much what else you do, as long as you are super devout to your God. And as an adult, like, like I said, I was raised Roman Catholic, and around 18, 19, I started, like, questioning things, and I would actually go to church on my own and try to learn a little more away from my parents. And after a while, like, at this point, I identify as an atheist, and really, like, that aspect of organized religion was one of the things that turned me off the most. Was like, it felt to me like there were so many instances, and not just in Catholicism, but in organized religion in general, there were so many instances where the church and its people were not practicing what they preach, literally, and we're not walking the walk. But as long as they were at church every Sunday, and as long as they were praying every night and stuff, they feel like they're good. And that always bugged me. And like you said, it totally does tie into race, because there's white people who, as long as they stay very devout to their God and pray to Jesus all the time, like, they it's almost like they feel like they can get away with other stuff. You know what I mean?
I mean, case in point, like the closed Facebook group that was made for Ahmad's, like, years, where they were just like, oh, they are Christian, and they love God, and they don't deserve this, and they, like, blah blah blah. I was just like, wow. But again, it's people weaponizing religion to defend their racism, and everything's fine as long as you can attach a scripture to it. But also keeping in mind that because I wanted to find out more about it, I got a minor in Christian religious studies, and many people don't realize that the Bible is has been edited numerous times.
Oh yeah.
Course of centuries, and things have been added, things have been taken out, and you have to acknowledge, or you have to question, why was that thing added, or why was that thing taken out? It is because there's a narrative that someone wants to control in order to control a group of people.
Yeah.
And then especially when you go into the idea as far as with race, it's one of these things where there might be a version of the Bible that says nothing about Jesus having, dark skin and woolly hair. And then more than likely that's going to go towards a denomination who disregards those people who have dark skin and woolly hair to fit the narrative that they want to create. So, so it's very interesting. And I found out a lot. And that's why I took the minor, not because I'm just I want to, be a priest, but I just definitely wanted to find out more information about that. And I find that people, especially people, have to start questioning things. People have to question, the church that they follow, question their denomination. And if you can question and still feel comfortable with the answers that you find or don't find, then good for you. But I think that especially when we're talking about race and how you can say that, they killed this black man, but they love Jesus, so it's okay. That's bullshit.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to just kind of talk. I'm going to piggyback off of you said that we need to start questioning things. What I say is, when we were children, that's all we did. And at some point in that midst of growing up, you were taught not to question things anymore because you would be perceived a certain way. And so we stopped. So I think what you were saying in that instance is completely correct, that we need to we should be questioning again, because that's what we're naturally innate to do. First off, that's another episode. Gosh, y'all.
No, it is another episode. I know.
I hope you're writing these down so you don't forget any.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all recorded. I cannot wait to go back and just look at all this. Yeah. So I'm ready for it. And I think, going back to just, like I said, and I've said this I think I've said this online on my platforms too, but bringing back that childhood innocence and understanding where that comes from, and just your everyday life, finding the new in things that, at least as an adult, you don't consider new anymore, rediscovering them as if you were a child. But that also comes with being able to put yourself in that mindset. And I think that also, I wouldn't say it's empathy, but it's definitely it's you have to put yourself in a child. You got to put yourself in child's shoes again in order to be able to do that. And I think that is a form of empathy in a way. So even when I see toddlers, or I don't know why I think of dogs, but let's say a dog pees on the floor and you get upset that the dog peed on the floor. He doesn't know any better. Don't hit him. Don't make him feel bad. Just teach him what to do. Understand that these kids and these animals, innocent animals, don't know what right from wrong is. And in a way, it's certain things that they think are wrong they shouldn't not think that they're I don't know how to describe it. Kids know things so well. They pick up on things and they know when something's not right. So if something they know if they're seeing that something isn't right, yet you're telling them it's okay, or vice versa, if they're doing something that is actually okay to do, I'm just gonna talk about it. Let's say a kid's trying to discover themselves. They're masturbating or something like that, but someone told them, you can't do that. That's not right. It's actually okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But someone somewhere told them that's not okay, so they don't do it. You know what I mean? I don't know how I got on this whole subject, but yeah. Yeah.
Well, yeah. you go first, Andy. You go.
Well, what you started off with was seeing the world through a kid's eyes and like questioning things and stuff. And honestly, that's one of my favorite parts of being a teacher is like I
Oh,
I get to
yes.
see and hear a lot of things through the kids' eyes, and um, sometimes they'll slip and say something, or slip and like bring up a topic around me that they're like, oh, we shouldn't talk about that. And it happens a lot.
Mm,
Like I'm a white teacher in a school where almost 100% of my students are black. So it's
mm,
like a lot of times that happens with race stuff. Where they say something, they'll be like, oh, we shouldn't talk about that. And it's like,
mm.
no, it's okay. We can talk about that. Um, but seeing it through their eyes and like learning to question stuff, or relearning to question stuff is one of the best parts of being a teacher. And I don't know because I don't have kids, but I imagine that's probably a great part of being a parent.
Yeah.
Is seeing the world through your kids' eyes. Also, I'm
Yes.
disappearing. I'm gonna turn this light on and let's see if I look crazy. No, it's not so
No.
bad.
No,
Yeah,
you're
I know
good.
it's
All right.
actually getting dark out now. Like we've really been
Yeah.
talking.
Well, look, I'm just going to add one more thing to
Okay.
that. And that here's the thing: there's an idea, and it's one of these things where people don't want questions to be asked because they don't want cracks in their beliefs. And when you start to challenge the very foundation that they were brought up on since birth, um, in some ways it's definitely connected to the same way as far as like racism. Like, like they were brought up on that, and they are afraid to be vulnerable and be wrong about what they were brought up with their whole life.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult for people to take, but then that's also why people grow up and not questioning things. I mean, I'm sure there are times where, put it like this, and I'm sure like all y'all can like understand this, is that no kid is born racist. They're
Hmm.
taught
Yep.
racism.
Yep.
And you have to know, and I already know this just as working with kids myself. It's one of these things where I'm just like, well, I'm sure some of those kids like questioned, why do we call those people that? Or why do we treat these people that way? And then they were shut down for inquiring or asking questions or
Yeah.
questioning their parents or questioning what their parents said God believes. And then they thereafter started to embrace that because they were taught that they were not to question such a thing, to
Yeah.
where now it's just the foundation of their beliefs.
Yep.
And yeah, that's a really good point too, because a lot of times people bring up the like slavery ended however many years ago, get over it. It's like when you look at, you look at slavery, you look at, especially I think about the civil rights movement, and like for example MLK's assassination. It's like
Bro.
that was not that long ago. Like
No.
like he was my grandma's age. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And it's and so people think it's far away, but just like you said, it's passed down. And if you're growing up with people who have those beliefs, they instill it in you.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Ooh wee. Well, on that note, y'all, I think we gonna wrap it up. I just wanna thank God. See, like we honestly we could go on a little bit longer, but this has been the longest podcast episode I have ever done so far. It's gonna be I said it was gonna be a 2-part episode. It's probably gonna be a 3-part episode. This is gonna last me for like the next 3 weeks. I'm telling y'all.
I mean, we talked about religion for a good portion of that too, which I
Yeah.
appreciate, which I like. So it's cool.
Yeah. So I want to just thank again William Howard and Andy Bauer for coming on to the Self-Aware Millennial podcast to talk about the most difficult subject in this country to even like admit to and just talk about. I really appreciate y'all for doing this. Like it means a whole lot, and I'm just really excited for other people to hear this conversation. I hope that they all stick through it to the end. I feel like it just kept going and it just kept going. And I feel like there's like just a whole audience that we are not even listening to right now that is cheering us on. And I'm excited for this. I'm excited for y'all's futures, like, cause y'all are both very talented in what y'all do. And I admire y'all as musicians, as friends and everything. But before we go, I wanted to make sure that y'all at least drop your handles. And since y'all are both also musicians that are, you know, not being able to perform nearly as much right now, drop your Cash Apps and Venmos too, so that everybody knows, how to reach you.
Well, my band is called Will and the Foxhounds, as in that Disney movie, Fox and the Hound, like Will and the Foxhounds.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you, Jessica. I actually can tell a very quick story.
Okay.
Very quick. Okay, how that name came about was because when I was younger, I would watch that movie all the time. I watched the VHS. And my mom knew that I was always into it, and I never wanted to be bothered when I'm watching the movie. So she invites my grandmother over. And then I would call the movie a certain thing. And she'd be like, Will, what are you watching? And I'd just be ignoring her. Will, what are you watching? Will, what are you watching? And I turn around and say, I'm watching The Fucking the Hound. And go right back to watching my movie. They were in tears, crying, laughing, everything. So then ever since then, The Fox and the Hound is something that they always make fun of me for, even now that I'm 30. And I was just like, well, that's a good moment. So now I'm going to name my band Will and the Foxhounds, which is how that came to be.
Love it. Full circle.
So do that. What about you, Andy? What's your handle?
I'm very simple. I'm not very good with social media. I have a Facebook and that's it. So if you feel like looking me up, you could find me pretty easy. But that's all I got.
Okay, cool.
Oh, and the main band that I play with is the New Orleans Johnnies, and we have a full-length album in the can right now. We're just figuring out when and how to get it out into the world, so it'll be coming out soon.
Awesome! This is wonderful. Oh gosh, I can't. Well, we're in phase 1. Hopefully, in the next couple of weeks, we'll be kind of sort of more out of this. But yeah, crossing our fingers that people don't do anything crazy to backtrack us instead of move us forward. But anyway, y'all, again, thank you so much. If y'all want, I'm thinking like all the things I have to do, like to like just get this up. Like I don't even know how this is like. We're gonna figure all that out later. Let me finish this up. Thank y'all so much for tuning into the Self-Aware Millennial. I will be on YouTube soon. And when you actually, if you're seeing this, obviously we're on YouTube now. But I also, if you are listening to this, you can find me on YouTube very soon once I get everything straightened out. But also I have a pop-in Instagram, as y'all have been hearing throughout this entire podcast, where I basically kind of talk and give like all of my insights on everything that is going on, not necessarily in my life, but just like anything that just kind of pops up. I just kind of talk about it in a self-aware manner in a way. I try to get that aura off, and I encourage my followers to always be self-aware and like before they comment, clearly as the other guy was saying, was trying to say, like I told him, I was like, yo, you gotta be self-aware enough to at least know you have white privilege. But anyway, follow me on Instagram, the Self-Aware Millennial, and you can also, if you have any questions or anything, compliments, suggestions, advice, you can email me at theselfawaremillennial@gmail.com. And with that, y'all, thank y'all so much. Everybody wave, whoever is like, well, I say wave so that we can get off of this recording and I can start doing my dirty work. And then I hope y'all have a great day and happy quarantines phase 1 day. Bye.
Bye.